Hey, I'm Kristen Anderson. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and welcome to Read This. We've got a bunch of books to talk about from our Friday reads from the past month. The first book I want to talk about is one called Barn 8 by Deb Olin Unferth. And Barn 8 is quirky. In fact, pretty much all of the books we're talking about this month have a little bit of quirk to them. This is a book about two women who are responsible for auditing kind of factory chicken farms who decide to essentially do a heist and steal chickens to free them. And it's got environmental themes to it. It's quirky. It's kind of got an unusual narrative structure. Different points of view are represented throughout, including, on occasion, a chicken or two. And turns out they make interesting narrators. But it seemed like something that would be a good fit for sharing. And I thought that because it has some interesting environmental themes, that I would also suggest for folks to whom that one sounds interesting, a book called The Ministry for the Future, which is sci-fi, but not like space opera sci-fi. It's probably not a sci-fi book for everyone. If you like your sci-fi with lots of action, this is not that. This is a sci-fi novel of ideas. If the summer that we're shaping up to have continues, you may want to put it off because it does start with kind of an apocalyptically bad heat wave in India that kills a lot of people. So it may seem a little scary right now this summer, but it's a novel about using. This is going to make it sound really boring. To make it sound like to make intelligent policy decisions to get kind of some of these climate issues resolved and find ways to use mechanisms that are built into free market systems to get the climate back on course in a direction that can have a future. Lots of it's set in Switzerland, and it's really interesting and good, but it's a novel of ideas. Again, a lot of these books I'm going to be saying this a lot today, I think, not for everyone. The next one I want to talk about is one we featured called Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer. That one's by Jamie Figueroa. And it is billed as being a good book to read if you like Jessamine Ward or Tommy Orange. That means titles like Sing Unburied Sing by Jessamine Ward and There by Tommy Orange. It's a story that has some magical realist elements in it. It is a family story set in a tourist town in Mexico, and it's about a brother-sister relationship. The brother and sister are twins, and so it also made me think of a recent title called The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, which also features twins prominently and is really unique and interesting and worth checking out. And also, These Ghosts Are Family by Maisie Card, which is another family-driven story that has some elements of magical realism in them, and just kind of an intertwining multiple point of view kind of perspective on the narrative. Third, we have a title called Earthlings by Sayaka Murata, and this has a super adorable cover, but it is not a super adorable book. This is one of those books that people either love or hate. Even in the reviews, you can see that people either thought it was awful or great, and it has some kind of intense content in terms of early childhood abuse, but it's set in Japan, and the main character decides that she's from another planet, and some of these narratives she creates around herself or to protect herself from some of the childhood abuse she's gone through. It is kind of it's set in Japan, and it's intended to kind of reflect on traditional women's roles in society as she gets older, as well as just kind of dealing with some of the abuse issues that happen early in the book. But there were the markers that this book have in terms of quirky narrative, and maybe takes a little bit of work in your, like, as you're reading to kind of fully get what the author is trying to do with it. It made me think of two other also quirky authors. One author it made me think of is Adisa Moshfegh, whose most recent book is Death in Her Hands, which is a book about a widow who finds a note on the ground on a walk that, out of context, has nothing to do with anything laying around her, but kind of implies that there's been a murder, although there is no body. And the rest of the story is her kind of trying to figure out how that note fits into the world around her, and making some kind of weird assumptions, jumping to some weird conclusions because of this note that she's found. It takes some work to read that book. And another book these sorts of books are books that, like, some people really, really like, and I actually go through stages where I do, and some stages where I want something easy. These are not the easy books. These are not the candy, beachy read books. Then there's Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi, and that she specializes in kind of almost fairy tale retellings, but not really. Narratively, they're more thematically fairy tale retellings. She's been compared a lot to kind of Angela Carter, who wrote in the 80s and 90s, and died in the 90s, so hasn't written in a while. But she's also somebody who specializes in the kind of magic realist themes. So books that take a little bit of work to get to the point. And the last book we featured was one called A Tip for the Hangman, which is a novel of Christopher Marlowe, and it's by Allison Epstein. It features playwright Kit Marlowe, and it starts from the kind of the assumption that the premise is that some point during his years in Cambridge, he was approached by the Crown and became a spy, and was somehow involved in the Mary Queen of Scots situation, and so this is set against kind of the theater world of Elizabethan England, but is also a spy novel. And Kit Marlowe is a big personality, and there's, great dialogue, but there's also, like, real historical stuff going on. Obviously, if you know much about Kit Marlowe, you probably know how he famously died, which was, kind of abruptly he was murdered, and this kind of fits his manner of death into the into the narrative of the spy story. So there's not going to be a sequel, because this is Christopher Marlowe's whole life. Anyway, really cool, probably good for people who enjoy kind of Elizabethan theater, because it has some of that feel about it. William Shakespeare makes a very brief appearance in the narrative, but not significant or lengthy. He's not a big player in the story. And if you like books like that, I had a couple other books that were historical settings, but also have kind of more modern day narrative structures. So, for example, The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton is a detective novel, but it's set on a boat in the 1630s. You don't see a whole lot of murder mysteries set during that period. And the other one that I thought that kind of fit into that vein of kind of some of the wisecracking detective dialogue and things like that is a title called A Dead Djinn in Cairo by P. Jelly Clark. And that one is not only historical, but also steampunk, and it's the 1900s. And it's a novella prequel to the first novel in a series that we don't own yet, but I'm sure we will soon, called Master of Gin. And that is super interesting and good if you like buddy cop trope, if you like steampunk, if you like, you know, the historical period. It's set in Cairo, so it's got an African flavor to it. It's really neat. So those are the books that I have for today, and hopefully at least one of those appeals, and we will see you again next month.